Most people remember the Santa Claus as a warm Christmas classic. But behind the snow, the laughter, and the magic is a story built on denial, hidden truths, and 15 quiet lies that shaped Scott Calvin's entire transformation. These weren't lies meant to deceive others. They were lies he told himself.
And though it has
From ignoring the contract in the red suit, to denying the changes in his own body, to watching adults dismiss the very magic happening right in front of them. Every moment reveals a deeper layer that most viewers never see. Today, we're peeling back those layers and uncovering 15 lies in the Santa Claus that you never knew existed. Before we dive in, make sure to like this video and subscribe. Now let's begin with Part 1. Part 1. The Underestimated Beginning. Christmas Eve opens with an incident that seems ridiculous. A noise on the roof, a familiar silhouette, then a fall that makes the man in the red coat vanish in a flash of light. Scott Calvin looks at it with the mindset of a grown-up used to rational explanations. He doesn't call it magic or mystery, he just treats it as an unlucky accident in a cold winter night. This attitude makes him step into a new role without any preparation. When he puts on the red suit to clean up the mess, Scott unconsciously signs a contract he doesn't understand. This is the first step in the chain of self-deception. Believing everything is just a temporary situation, so he doesn't have to touch anything that goes beyond his logical frame. Part 2. Calming his son with a half-true story. Charlie, with childlike trusting eyes, asks what is happening. Instead of admitting he's confused, Scott pieces together a story that mixes truth and reassuring words. He both denies and hints that something special is going on. The way Scott answers makes Charlie believe even more that the sleigh ride is a real mission, while Scott simply thinks he's saying whatever it takes so his son will stop worrying. This ambiguity creates the first crack between two worlds: children who believe in wonder and adults who see it as a joke. Charlie can't clearly separate them because Scott himself doesn't. That lack of consistency later becomes the excuse adults use to label the boy as overly imaginative. Part 3. The tiny clause that changes everything. The little piece of paper in the red coat pocket is the key Scott glances over as a trivial detail. While the elves treat it as sacred law, Scott sees it as a silly little card. He doesn't read it carefully, doesn't question why such a strange condition exists. He just follows his instincts to get through the situation in front of him. But that clause has the power to transform his role from an ordinary salesman and father into the new embodiment of the holiday. Here, the deception lies right inside the structure of the North Pole system. They present the rules in a simple, seemingly harmless way, so the person stepping in doesn't realize he has crossed a point of no return. Part 4. Denying the first changes. When his body starts reacting, Scott chooses denial. He never considers that a beard that grows back in seconds has any deeper meaning. He treats it as a midlife oddity. When his belly swells after a single meal, he tells himself it's just bad diet. Even as his face ages over a matter of days, he soothes himself with easy explanations. Scott doesn't want to believe that his body is telling a truth he is avoiding, that what happened on the roof was not a prank. The long-running lie here is his attempt to cling to his old image so he won't have to face what is arriving too fast. Part 5. A useless resistance to the new appearance. Scott tries to fight the transformation in every way he can. He shaves, only for the beard to grow back in an instant. He attempts dieting but craves cookies and hot milk. He switches to business clothes and tries to keep the look of a busy office man, yet everyone can see he's turning into the familiar holiday figure. This resistance is a battle lost from the start. The harder Scott tries to act like his old self, the more his body forces him down the new path. This is self-deception aimed inward. Believing habits and outward style can defeat what has already become part of his nature. Part 6. Adults' blind faith in rationality. It's not just Scott. Laura and Neil stand firmly on the side of adults who've lost faith in wonder. They believe everything must fit neatly inside a rational frame. Anything beyond that is automatically fantasy or cognitive error. When Charlie tells the story of that night's flight, they immediately treat it as fabrication. They think they're helping him break free of illusions, but in fact they're protecting their own worldview from being shaken. Scott is caught between two poles. On one side, he witnesses strange changes in his own body. On the other, adults deny everything. The deception here isn't meant to harm anyone. They simply lack the courage to admit that truth might be different from what they were taught. Part 7. Old wounds shaping present views. Laura and Neil carry childhood wounds. That moment when they discovered the magic of Christmas was just pretend took away a piece of innocence. They bring that memory into adulthood and unconsciously impose it on Charlie. They don't want the same disappointment to happen again. But in trying to protect him from wrong belief, they end up hurting him in another way by dismissing his real experience. They tell themselves they're simply being responsible, yet deep down, they're still those kids who were crushed by a gift that wasn't what they hoped for. This is a gentle, long-lasting deception. They think they've grown up, but they're still living in the shadow of the past. Part 8. A sanitized image of the holiday figure. In children's imaginations, the holiday figure is flawless. Always cheerful, never wrong, never tired. When Scott starts taking on that shape, he tries to play the role by the book. His smile is stiff, his posture rigid, his words formulaic, making him a hollow version of the ideal image. This unintentionally creates a mutual deception. Kids think they are meeting the real legend, while Scott forces himself to become the version they expect. The film suggests that this figure isn't some distant icon, but an ordinary man learning to adapt. To reach that natural state, Scott first has to peel away the artificial performance. Part 9. A body that speaks while the mind denies his body sends increasingly clear signals. His heart responds to Christmas music. His eyes light up at the sight of cookies. He feels oddly comfortable in red. But Scott keeps explaining everything with familiar thinking. When the doctor finds nothing wrong, he doubles down on the idea that something is medically off but unsolved. He refuses to accept that his body is transforming to match a new role. This mirrors the deception of an adult facing overwhelming change. They cling to the idea that, if they insist long enough, reality will return to what it used to be, even as all evidence points the other way. Part 10. Charlie trapped between two belief systems. Charlie is absolutely sure of what he experienced. Yet he's forced to live between two belief systems, one born from his direct experience, the other from the supposedly reasonable advice of adults. Scott neither fully confirms nor denies, leaving Charlie even more confused. The boy can't betray what he saw, but he also doesn't want to fight the grown-ups. This tension makes him look like a stubborn child, when he's really just trying to hold on to the memory of a special night. The film shows that adults often feel confident they understand more, but sometimes they are the ones who see the least clearly. Part 11. The North Pole and a One-Way Rulebook. The North Pole in the film looks bright and magical, but beneath it lies a set of rules that allows no negotiation. Whoever puts on the red suit becomes the successor. The elves don't ask for consent, don't give detailed explanations. They treat it as natural law. They package everything in a playful, festive way, as if Scott is only joining a fun game. Behind the sparkle, the truth is that everything has already been decided. Scott is warmly welcomed, but at the same time locked into a role he never explicitly agreed to. This is a deception born from a world that runs on its own rules but doesn't clearly state them to newcomers. Part 12. Misreading what it means to be a father. Because Scott doesn't act in the way adults define as reasonable, he's seen as unstable. Taking his son on a bizarre adventure becomes evidence that he's unfit as a parent. The irony is that when Scott is literally caring for millions of children, adults interpret that as a sign he's having a breakdown. They see a failing father, even though he's evolving in a completely different direction. This deception stems from rigid standards about fatherhood, which prevent people from accepting a different form of growth. Part 13. The courtroom as a machine that legalizes denial. The custody hearing turns Scott into the target of the legal system. Every attempt to explain is recorded as proof of delusion. Every effort to defend Charlie's experience is reinterpreted as fantasy. Court is not a place where his kind of truth can be heard. It's a place where norms are enforced. Scott is forced to prove something that can't be measured by the tools adults insist on using. The final decision is procedurally correct but fundamentally unjust. This is a sophisticated form of deception, a conclusion that looks proper on paper while completely ignoring the reality we as viewers know is true. Part 14. A promise that becomes his lifeline. While he's cut off from his son, Scott clings to the promise that he will always come back. At first, it's just a way to comfort a frightened boy, afraid of losing his father. But over time, it becomes the only thing keeping Scott from collapsing. When everyone else sides with denial, this promise becomes the thread connecting father and son. It started as a soft lie when Scott himself didn't fully understand his new role, but it turns into the most honest part of his journey. Through that promise, he's reminded that the change isn't just about him, but about the child who believes in him without conditions. Part 15. A warm ending with a heavy price. When the misunderstandings clear and the family bond is mended, the film closes on a warm, glowing image. Charlie is happy, Laura and Neil accept the truth, and Scott fully embraces his new role. But behind that ending lies a serious cost. Scott has to accept living away from his son most of the year, living in a world not meant for humans, and carrying a lifelong, heavy responsibility. The movie focuses on the light at the end, but that sacrifice still lies under the snow like a thin layer. To become a symbol of comfort and hope for children, Scott must give up a large part of his ordinary life. This is the final deception. The cozy ending hides a faint sadness that older viewers can sense if they look closely.